percentage falling below 50%. So more people have a positive opinion, and I think that's good. That bodes well for workers in this country. Politics, that's a huge debate. I happen to be one of those people who believes in the sort of all of the above action. In other words, I think unions have to work hard to strengthen themselves and build their own activism and democracy, but they also need to be sensitive to political activism and democracy. Other people feel unions have spent too much time playing politics and not getting a lot out of it. I'm concerned that if they ignore politics, politics isn't going to treat them any better. Your point about unions and sort of larger social issues, again, particularly in the 30s and 40s with what were called the CIO unions. Those are the big industrial unions. Many of them, not all, but many of them were very involved in questions of civil rights and racial justice, questions of, they even talked about things like national health care. And you're right, after the Second World War, many of the largest unions became much more restricted. They talk more about what we call today business unionism. All we care about is what our own members get. What are their wages? What are their benefits? What are our work rules? Which are all important, but if you don't care about the rest of the community.
Do the same as the production people. So we do the same. We have the same. We're on the production line. We understand the need. We understand people. We listen to them. So it's just that's what something that you can't really compare to any regular company.
Molly, you grew up in this area. How do you sort of put in context this movement toward worker ownership with, say, the legacy of someone like Ella Mae Wiggins in the Laurier Mills strike? Do they belong in the same paragraph?
I thought that was a beautiful question. What would Ella Mae be doing today? That really made me start thinking. I hope that employee ownership can become another face of the labor movement, right? As folks are struggling to unionize, I think that's a wonderful struggle, and we support them. And I think there are these other models, particularly for smaller businesses. And we're starting to see this opportunity with many businesses also coming onto the market. And we look at, there's some powerful studies that have been done about small businesses in Western North Carolina, and how many of those will just in the next 10 years either shut down or go off, and these are important businesses, particularly to small rural communities. So we really see the opportunity for workers in small companies and large companies to have more of a stake, and as Walter is also saying, more of a voice through this model of employee ownership. And there's a lot of different ways to do it, and we're really excited to be part of the North Carolina Employment Ownership Center that's getting started, and other organizations like our 501c3 that is helping people creatively think about how they have voice, and that voice is tied to equity, and that equity is tied to really rooting opportunities and rooting.
I mean, there's no other way to interpret a formula like that.
That's George Howard, a professor of music business management at Berklee College of Music. He says that, like many tech companies, Spotify is focused on growing as big as possible, hoping to reward its investors in the future. In the world of venture capital, that means you can have a multi-billion-dollar stock market value and still...
Soldier?
Yes, Commander.
What is your name?
Hua Jun, Commander.
Is this your family sword?
It belongs to my father, Hua Zhou.
So John, this film seemed tailor-made to be seen in the theater, and everyone was very excited to see it in the theater. It was pushed back because of the pandemic, and finally to the streaming service Disney Plus. I mean, that was a big statement at the start of the pandemic.
I think you could look at the Walt Disney Company before and after the pandemic and write an entire book. Because before the pandemic hit, Disney controlled 40% of the box office. And the entire Disney business model was getting a group of strangers together in a theme park, and a cruise ship, and a Broadway musical, and a movie theater, and a sporting event because they own ESPN, and that blew up. I mean, this is a company that a year ago made more than $10 billion, and this past fiscal year, their first loss in 4 decades. Wow. So what Disney did is fascinating, because I think they said, why would we open a movie where we know we're not going to do very good business in a theater, instead of taking it to our streaming service where people want to see it, they know the name. They basically said, we don't believe in the theatrical model right now, and maybe not at all going forward.
One other thing that we saw this year, it's been the year of what we call racial reckoning, with the death of George Floyd in May and the protests that followed. How did Hollywood respond?
Slowly. I mean, I think the one thing that's sadly true about Hollywood is it doesn't really have a moral compass, it has a financial compass. And that compass, you know, it's always pointed to profits and not what is right. And back and hear live music, to go to an art museum, the enrichment that art gives the nation collectively is so important. And sadly, it's, you know, that personal experience has gone away. I think that has a really damaging effect on the mental and cultural health of the nation.
Art is an expression of our humanity.